Think about when you are stretched to stretching point, to breaking point with your workload and everything going on in your world. What happens? You just want to opt out of everything. This is how we are wired at a base level. And it's really important as a speaker that you understand this. So then how do we work to reduce overwhelm, and how do we work to make sure that what we say is landing for our audiences and for the people we're speaking to? Welcome to episode 18, where I am ready, so ready to walk you through one of the biggest mistakes we make when we're speaking, and that is the creation of overwhelm. Now, the creation of overwhelm is something that is a result of falling into what I call the clever trap. Now, the clever trap is simply, in speaking terms, it is this. And this applies whether you are a professional speaker, a professional who is paid to speak, somebody looking to build their business, somebody looking to create an accelerated movement. It doesn't matter what your purpose for speaking is. We all fall into the clever trap. And the clever trap is quite simple. It is, oh my goodness, I have the opportunity to speak. I need to jam pack this with value. I need to get as many things into it as possible. I need to actually show the audience how smart I am, how clever I am. I need to get them thinking about all the things that I know to be true about the world. I need to aggravate all the problems that I know that I solve. I need to be able to showcase my expertise and my ability to fix things in their world. And I need to get it all into one go. Now, what's really crazy is we feel like that at 45 and 60 minutes, and we still feel like that at 10 minutes. And what I find is we fall into this trap of wanting to add value, of wanting to give everything that we've got. And so the trap is actually coming from a really great place. The trap is actually coming from wanting to be of service and wanting to give. The interesting dilemma that appears, though, and this is what I want you to think about, is when we're wanting to get everything in, when we're wanting to showcase all of our ways of being, when we're wanting to really show how clever we are and all the things that we can help them with, that is actually about us. And it is not about our audience. At that point, we are not in service to our audience. To be in service to our audience, we actually have to give them something that they can take away. And when we give them too much, we overwhelm them. When we jam it all in, we overwhelm them. And this is why it matters, because many of us have been conditioned to believe that when we add value, when we give as much as we can possibly squeeze into that few moments, many of us have been conditioned to believe that our audiences, or the people listening to us, or the people listening to our presentations, that they will simply choose what it is that suits them and leave the rest. But neurologically, when we overwhelm, that is not what happens. When we create overwhelm, people delete everything. Now, earlier in this podcast, as we were launching this series, I talked about when I was first speaking and how I was high energy, I was in demand, people loved hearing me. And then I started to realize that people could not remember what I told them. So they could remember the emotional state, they could remember the feeling of listening to me, and they always wanted to listen to me again. But they could never remember what I told them. And it was because I came from a consulting and coaching background. At that stage, when I was first starting to speak, I was very much in the consulting space, in professional services, recruitment, HR, moving into industrial relations. And what was really interesting was I was in demand, but people couldn't remember, because I was coming from a place in those industries, and even in industries that I worked in after that, we're conditioned to believe through tender responses and project proposals and things like that, that we have to value add. So it was always about in that world, it was always about what is the core of what you're going to do and deliver, and then how are you going to add value? Now, the value adds also eroded margins, also meant that you ended up being measured on things that shouldn't have been measured on. There were so many things that were wrong with the value add, but that is also why we are conditioned to believe that we have to give everything we have every time we get the opportunity. Now, when we overwhelm, when someone reaches a point of overwhelm, they do not choose what they're going to take. They simply delete everything, right? I just want to reiterate, I really want that to land for you. And if you're unsure about it, because it's just my personal experience telling you this, think about a child who's hit overwhelm, who's overtired. Think about the fact that you can't actually get down and reason with them, right? Think about an experience where you've had where the learning has been too hard, or it's been too much to learn all at one time. What happens? Quite often you give up. Think about when you are stretched to stretching point, to breaking point with your workload and everything going on in your world. What happens? You just want to opt out of everything. This is how we are wired at a base level. And it's really important as a speaker that you understand this. So then how do we work to reduce overwhelm, and how do we work to make sure that what we say is landing for our audiences and for the people we're speaking to? Well, there's a secret here that I want you to understand and take with you, and that is the power of 7. And I'm not talking about 7 being used as a sales strategy or tactic or in our pricing. I'm talking about the power of 7 neurologically. When we are in a learning state, or when we are hearing new things, we can only absorb 7 plus or minus 2 new chunks of information, which means we can absorb very easily 5. And depending on our capacity at the time, we can absorb up to 7, and at a stretch 9 if we're heavily invested. So we need to make sure that we're not landing any more than 5 to 9 serious chunks of information. So whether that is our strategies, our frameworks, our tools, our perspectives, our big ideas, our research, our data, the questions you want to ask, all the things that we give people within a speaking context, we need to make sure that we are bringing that back to 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. Anything more than that, and we are going to overwhelm our audience. It's actually, we touched on TED Talks in an earlier episode, and it's actually one of the things that is so powerful about them. So I want you to think about this. TED Talks actually only have between 5 and 7 key chunks of information. That's part of the reason why they do go viral, because they are one bold idea and they are supported by an amount of chunks of information that we can actually absorb easily. Many of them only have 5 chunks. So this is why it really matters. Now, what I want you to think about, and we are going to walk you through in future episodes exactly how we do all of this, but what I want to touch on is this. If we only have 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information, then every time we speak, it actually must be the best of you, because it cannot be all of you. I want you to think about that. If our maximum absorption capacity of any member of our audience is 9 chunks of information, ideally 7, and 5 is super comfortable, then every time we speak, it can only ever be the best of us and never can be all of us. So how do we do this? Well, as I just mentioned, there is a process we're going to walk you through over the coming episodes. But what I want to give you right now is one of the techniques we use where I actually ask our people to flip their thinking. And what I mean by this is, instead of going, oh, there's 5 big ideas or 7 big ideas or a matrix of 3 by 3 to give us 9 chunks of information, or whatever it is that you might be putting together, what I want you to think about is this. When we build from our conscious baseline to what we know we need to deliver, so say 7 chunks of information, it's almost like we already have our filters on and we don't necessarily bring the best of us. So what I say with the people I work with is, I want to flip your thinking. I want you to think about getting everything out that you know and then bringing it back to what is actually the most powerful. Because for most of us, especially if we have deep lived experience or deep worked experience that we've been able to codify in some way to share with others to make a difference in their world, we have a lot that hides in our blind spots and our everyday. The things that we think, doesn't everybody know that? Can't they just do that? The things that we forget that we had to learn along the way. So in this neurostorming process, which is what I call it, in this neurostorming process, what we're doing is we're going deep into understanding what it is that is actually genius for our audiences, not from our perspective, from theirs. And this is completely in support of the Blue Apple. Okay. And what I want you to think about is this. If you've ever done a 100 things to do before I die, things on your bucket list, 100 things to do while I live a great life. What I have found, and I know from talking to a lot of people, it feels the same for them, is that the first sort of 20, 30, maybe even 40 are really fast. I can rattle them off really quickly. The next sort of 20 to 30 get a little bit more challenging and I have to really think. And the last 10 to 20, I sometimes need like a bottle of wine or a yoga retreat for days on top of a mountain to be able to get those last ones out. And that is because we automatically go to what is front of mind and top of mind. Then we dig a bit deeper and we can find it and identify it, but we have to actually let things sit and rest to be able to get the best of us. Now, if we only have 7 to 9 chunks of information as a maximum within anything between 10 minutes and 60 minutes, then we actually need to make sure we're getting at the best of us and just not what is top of our mind. We need to get the things that are going to break into the minds and then the hearts of our audiences. And that's quite often hidden away and locked in our blind spots and our everyday. So what happens in our brainstorming process, our neurostorming process? Well, this is quite straightforward. What I want you to do is I want you to get some fluorescent Post-it notes. They cannot be pastel. They need to be fluorescent to spark creativity. I want you to use a black Sharpie pen. Get yourself a black Sharpie pen. And the reason it's a black Sharpie pen is because the feeling and the texture of that is quite kinesthetic. Then I want you to actually find somewhere in your space that is either glass windows, glass walls, glass doors, at the very least mirrored cupboard doors. And we're going to actually walk you through right now exactly how you neurostorm. You are going to write your first Post-it note of an idea that you have or something you want to say or something you want to share about the specific topic. And you're going to stand in front of that glass wall, door, window, mirrored cupboard door, and you are going to stand up on your tippy toes and reach your hand up, and you're going to put that first Post-it note up as far as you can reach. Now, the reason for doing this is that when you get stuck, as you will, you are going to step back from that wall in the third perceptual position, and you are going to look up to that first row of Post-it notes that you will have, which are going to be above eye height. And what this does is it puts you into recall zone. Right? Now, the beauty of doing this on glass and why we do this on glass is because I want you to see beyond. It's the same philosophy as the difference between a gold medalist and a silver medalist in Olympic swimmers. The silver medalist swims to the wall. The gold medalist swims through the wall. And it's the same with this. I want you to see beyond a closed wall. I want you to see through the wall so that you can continue to bring the best of you. And we keep going. Now, how do we know that it's all out? We actually, well, in my world, I keep those Post-it notes up for sometimes up to a week at a time, but not all of us have that luxury. What we're going to do, though, is every time we find ourselves stopping, we are actually going to ask ourselves, and what else? And what else? And what else? And we will ask ourselves that 7 times with the space in between. And when we can get to number 7 without another Post-it note being written, then we know we have everything out. Now, this actually is really important. The elements that are important is to have the glass wall to start from as high as you can possibly reach, to take a step back and look up to that into the recall zone. It really played out for somebody who was actually in one of our earlier workshops, and she is an intimacy coach. She is a big, bold, beautiful personality, and she was actually just standing in front of the wall and putting things up straight in front of her. And every time I tried to get her to put it up higher, she just laughed and said something about it being like the same height as her breasts. And it was like a lot of fun and everything. But all of a sudden, she started to realize that everybody else was getting dozens of Post-it notes out, and she had 5. And she kept saying to me, man, I can't think of anything. Like, this is really hard, and look at everyone else. And I said to her, can you just humor me? Can you actually follow the instructions? Can you actually start from as high as you can possibly reach and take that step back from the wall? And she finally gave in and she said, oh, okay. She literally rolled her eyes, said, okay, I will. And she did it. And you know what? Within 10 minutes, she was streaming Post-it notes. This thing is really powerful. Now, obviously, that is getting everything out. Some of the prompts that we use when you get a little bit stuck are, what do you want to say about this? What do you wish everyone knew about this? What is it that you teach others? What are the coffee questions that you get asked all the time? What is the things that if this was the last time you could speak on this, you would want your audience to walk away knowing what to do? What is the models that you know? What is the code that you've learned? What is the questions you want people to ask? What are the questions you ask others? These are the sorts of prompts questions, but you want to get everything out. There is no right or wrong about the amount of information. Hot tip for those in the audience who are a little bit OCD as well is you actually want to you don't need to make it straight and neat. It can be all over the place. Now, that is how we actually get everything out. And it will surprise you what comes up in that process that you forgot about. And it's usually the things that you forgot about that are your most powerful. Now, obviously, if you've got dozens, sometimes hundreds of post-it notes up on a glass wall or a glass door, that is not all going to go into your speech. We do have processes to walk you through, and we will do that later in these conversations to bring it back to the most powerful part that you have. But I want you to start here. I want you to get used to flipping your thinking. I want you to get used to getting everything out and not just assuming that the first thing that comes to mind is the most powerful when it comes to speaking. This is because creating overwhelm is the number one thing that keeps people stuck in the red zone, in the you're so good zone, and stops them from going to gold zone. Now, whilst your post-it note wall in front of you may seem overwhelming, it is in actual point of fact one of the vital first steps to training yourself to go after what's best and not everything. We start with getting it all out, revealing all of our blind spots, revealing our everyday, and then bringing it back to the most powerful for our audience using the filters of the blue apple. Now, this is a starting point. This is where I want you to start. And over the conversations to come, over the next number of episodes, we will take you further into how we refine them. But for now, I just want you to think about how often are you overwhelming your audience? How often are they deleting what you're telling them? And is this actually what's keeping you stuck? And is this actually what's stopping you from moving from good to great?